What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going through my preliminary finals tips for 2025. So let's get straight into it. Now, unlike the first week, I actually had a pretty good week last week. So I ended up getting the 2 out of 2 for the semi-finals tips. Yeah, look, I only got 1 out of 4 in the first round, but I ended up getting both of the semi-finals tips correct, and there was really only out of the both games, probably one of them was an upset, but I tipped the Hawks against the Crows. Yeah, look, that was a really massive win for Hawthorn. They're still the 8th seed, people do remember, but, they're absolutely flying at the moment. They're certainly not showing like they're the bottom seed in the finals because they've just been really good, and they've really shown that they are true contenders this year, the Hawks. So they face the Cats in a preliminary final this week, but obviously the Crows are the most disappointing team, you feel like, of this final series. Obviously they were without Rankin, going to be without Rankin for this final series unless they made a grand final, but you looked at them, they finished first, and yeah, look, they went out in straight sets for the first time since 1983. Yeah, look, no Premier has gone out in straight sets since 1983. So really disappointed. If you'd be really disappointed if you're an Adelaide fan, obviously. But the Hawks just played much better, I thought, and away from home they've been getting the job done, and that just proves that they definitely can win a grand final this year. Now that they have probably proven to us that even though earlier in the season they did let Leeds slip up away from home and leading at 3/4 time, they've matured now. They've fixed up those mistakes, and yeah, look, it was a really good win, but it was a really good tip by me as well, because I'm pretty sure 23% of people end up tipping Hawthorn. So that was a good tip for me. Then the second game I also got correct, where, yeah, look, this game was pretty boring. I mean, for the first half, it was pretty close, and especially the first quarter. Ben King, he was really hot for the Gold Coast Suns. But unfortunately, yeah, look, the Lions were just too much of a task for the Suns. And you'd still be disappointed if you are a Gold Coast fan, because you thought that maybe with Lachie Neale, they were a bit of the chance. But Brisbane, they're too good to go out in straight sets. They certainly proved that, and they ended up getting a massive win over in Queensland in the first ever Q Clash derby by 53 points. So, yeah, look, again, the margins were a bit off. Again, we didn't really get any good games, to be honest. We've only really had the one good game between Brisbane and Gold Coast this whole final series out of the 6 games. So hopefully we definitely get some more better close games, and there really should be with these matchups this week. But the Lions, far too strong for the Suns there, and yeah, look, they move on to a preliminary final. So let's get into the tips for this week. So we do start off with a mouth-watering clash. It's almost like a mini rivalry with these two matchups, obviously. We've seen them before in the final series, and we have seen them quite recently, although this one we haven't seen in about 10 years. But this just brings back so many 2010s vibes, late 2000s vibes. It's the Hawks taking on the Cats at the MCG. This is going to be an unbelievable game. The crowd's going to be, you'd expect there to at least be 90,000 plus at this game. This is the ultimate rivalry in which we have seen arguably probably the two most dominant teams since the year 2000. Both teams winning a total of 4 premierships since 2000, I believe. So now they're back at their best peaks. This is just going to be a really good game. You've got stars like Jeremy Cameron for Geelong, and you've got stars like, it's just going to be a really good and enjoyable game to watch, I do feel like, for both teams. But yeah, look, we'll start off with the Hawks. Obviously, as we said, they are the underdogs out of these 4 teams. I'm sure, as in terms of favourites for the premiership, I definitely think that them being the 8th seed, which hasn't historically done well. I believe the last time the 8th seed made the grand final was all the way back in 1965 or something like that. So the Hawks, if they win that, they'll be the first team since then to go through to a grand final. But yeah, look, this is going to be, I feel like, a very good match, because obviously the Cats had the 1 week break with their massive dominant win over the Lions. So the Hawks, they're really in form, and they've got lots of momentum at the moment. Although so with the Cats, because, as we said earlier on in the season, some people have called them flat track bullies because they hadn't have beaten the best sides, but you can only beat who is in front of you at the end of the day, and they certainly proved that against the Lions. So yeah, look, I think this is going to be a very good game. Again, I just can't really see this not being a good game. If there's any side to thrash the other, I think it will be Geelong thrashing Hawthorn in this one, but I feel like both sides shouldn't remain pretty competitive, and hopefully we do get a better matchup here for the final series. So, look, again, I feel like this is still a tough game to predict. Obviously, a lot of people will be predicting the Cats in this game, but if Hawthorn turn up the pressure, and they're going to have a big crowd there. It is a Cats home game, but the Hawks are at the MCG where they do love to play their best footy. If they turned it up, then they could certainly win this game here, but I am slightly leaning towards Geelong. I just think they've finished second this year. They had a heartbreak last year in one of the games of the final series we have seen, one of the best games of the final series we have seen over the last 10 years, beating Brisbane last year. I just think that they'll want revenge. They'll want to go through to a grand final. They probably deserve it. I know Hawthorn are in some momentum right now, but I'm going to go the Cats in a pretty decent game here by 13 points at the MCG in our first preliminary final. And the second and last game of the prelims is Brisbane taking on Collingwood, another massive rivalry. We've seen this matchup in the finals since the year 2000. We saw these two sides play off in a grand final a couple years ago, pretty recently, and before that we did see Collingwood and Brisbane play off against each other in 02 and 03, where I believe Brisbane did get back-to-back premierships over Collingwood. So yeah, look, again, this should be another pretty interesting game and a very tough game to predict. If you ask me which one's tougher to predict after Hawthorn and Geelong game and Brisbane-Collingwood game, I honestly wouldn't know. I'd probably say this one's a bit more tough to predict because, you know, a couple weeks ago, Brisbane, they looked really sloppy at the MCG. You know, they just looked like their hoodoo came back. And I know they were missing a couple of players, but it was just really disappointing against Geelong. Geelong just controlled the footy against them, but they did get a massive response against these Suns, in which quite a few people were predicting them to get up. So it was a bit more of an underrated win for Brisbane, and they probably could have even won by more if they had have kicked just a little bit more accurate. And well, as for the Pies, well, they obviously got a massive win in week 1 against the Crows. I don't know, maybe it wasn't that impressive now seeing that the Crows did go on in straight sets, but you should be pretty confident coming into this game if you're both teams. Brisbane have proven they can beat Collingwood in Melbourne. Last time these two sides did meet, we did see Brisbane get the win at the MCG. So Brisbane, they could definitely win this game as well as Collingwood. I mean, both sides have plenty of reasons why they can win this game. Obviously, Collingwood being the home side, they'll have the crowd on their factor. But I just think for Brisbane, this could be a little bit more of a mental thing. I know they don't have the MCG hoodoo, but they'll be thinking back to the grand final when they lost it by 4 points against Collingwood. It's going to be similar circumstances just a week earlier in the prelims. I don't know if the Lions can just get the job done here. They will be without Lachie Neale, so I think now the favourites to go through to the grand final, I'm pretty sure, are Geelong and Collingwood, based off the betting odds and just based off of what everyone's predicting, and I'm slightly going to agree with that. I could definitely see Brisbane getting up here if they do just play their game style and really take it away from Collingwood through that corridor, but I'm going to go the Pies here. I think that they probably deserve to make it through to a grand final. They've had a poor second half, but they've certainly proven a couple of people wrong in the first week of finals. So I think we're going to get a Geelong and Collingwood grand final here, and I'm going to say the Pies win this one in a pretty decent game. I think this might just be a game that they come out firing really hot, but Brisbane kind of work themselves back in. But I reckon the Cats, they'll just do enough. The Pies. I reckon they'll do enough here. I'm going to go the Pies by 20 points at the MCG. So those are my tips for the prelim. So I do have a Geelong and Collingwood grand final. What a game that would be. I mean, any game really out of these four teams would be an awesome grand final matchup. If I had to rank the sides of who would be most likely to least likely for the premiership, I'd probably go Geelong, then Collingwood as my second favourite, then Brisbane, then Hawthorn. But let me know who your favourites are for the grand final, and let me know who you think will win the prelims for this week. Hopefully, we do get much better games, and the matchups should be really strong, considering that they're going to attract massive crowds, you would imagine. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.